Okay.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Steve Kemper. I own a company called S-Mark Business Solutions. One of the things I like to talk about when I talk about what I do is to use some analogies. If you think about things like the internet, Google, Amazon, Yelp, websites in general, social media, smartphones, email. We didn't have any of those things 40 or 50 years ago. And yet the world has changed so that people can have things that they can now use to enhance their business life, their personal life, and everything else. If you think about technology changes over the last even 10 years, it's gone crazy in terms of what things are capable of doing. And businesses that aren't staying up with that technology are falling behind when it comes to their ability to serve their own customers or their ability to do their own jobs as efficiently as they possibly could. What happens with technology is not that you have to have the latest and greatest, unless of course you're one of those people that has to buy something before it even came out because it's untested and you don't even know. But in the main, most technology changes improve what you're capable of doing. Phone systems are very, very interesting. My first telephone in my car was in 1985. I lived in Chicago, and I paid $1,500 plus and 60 cents a minute to have a phone mounted on my center hump of my car so that I could make phone calls from my car. It was an old analog phone system, and nobody else had one, and everybody thought it was a luxury. Now you see people with smartphones that do thousands of times more than those old analog phones do, that are basically computers that you're carrying around, and you have the internet and you have everything else on them. And that technology has basically served businesses and individuals very, very well. I occasionally run into companies that have old phone systems, and they tell me, if it's not broke, why do I need to change it? I make calls, I get calls, and what they don't realize is that they are missing out on what the capabilities are of newer phone systems. About 15 years ago, I was calling on a law firm, and they had an old phone system, and it didn't even have voicemail. And the receptionist was taking handwritten messages, and sometimes the attorneys wouldn't get those messages for 2 or 3 or 4 hours because they were sitting at the front desk on a pink slip that was handwritten. And so they missed the opportunity to interact with their client simply because they just didn't have the message. It could have been very important, and nobody actually delivered the message to them. They asked me, Steve, if I get a phone system with a voicemail system, do I have to keep my receptionist? And I said, well, that's a different call. Then that's a personnel decision. That's not a technology decision. But why do you have the receptionist up there? Well, she takes the calls and she delivers our messages when we're free. And I said, well, if that's the only thing she's doing, and she's not greeting people as they come in, my guess is a voicemail system could be replaced by an auto attendant, and the auto attendant could route the call for you just the way she's routing the call for you. And you can still screen the calls using your own voicemail system, but you'll have your messages instantly. And they ended up buying the phone system, and they were paying, I don't even know what they were paying the receptionist, but they saved the entire money on what their cost for their receptionist was, that was doing nothing more than routing calls and delivering messages. Well, that's just one small change in technology. Nowadays, voicemail systems can send a voicemail to your email. They can notify you on your smartphone, so you can get it remotely. The thing that I do is I help companies analyze what they're not doing or what they're losing in productivity. But the other thing I do all the time is help companies figure out what products and services make the most sense. I never collect one penny from any one of my customers. I am paid by the carriers that they end up choosing, or the providers they end up choosing, if they choose to go with my recommendation. So my service is free. They will get calls every day, every week, every month from a whole bunch of different people providing phone systems, phone services, internet services, and they're all going to say they're the best. What I do is help companies figure out what makes the most sense, because I have most or all of those companies in my arsenal. What I am is an agent. And I can do on an unbiased basis what these companies are going to do on a biased basis. If you pick, well, I'm not going to pick a carrier, but if you pick any one carrier, they're always going to tell you, here's what I do, here's why you should use me, here's what's the best, here's the price, oh, this is a great deal. And then they're going to sign you up on a 3-year contract. And then you find out there's a better deal out there, but you're now stuck in a 3-year contract. What I do is I help companies shop for the best deal, the best combination of product, service, customer support, and functionality, and also things that will enhance productivity. The other thing I do is look at phone bills. Many phone bills are wrong. They're simply just not accurate, or they're paying for services that they don't need, or there are better alternatives than what they have. And a lot of people look at their phone bill and say, oh, it looks like last month's, okay, go ahead and pay it, accounts payable. And they don't even think about the amount of money they're spending. I got a referral from Alan probably 2 years ago, and they wanted a cloud-based phone system. They didn't want a premise-based phone system. I was introducing a premise-based phone system that would have saved them a fortune. So they signed up with one of the cloud-based hosted providers, and then they looked at their phone bill and they're paying $730-something a month with taxes and surcharges for service, some of the services they don't need, but also they were paying a very high price per seat. Without mentioning the carrier, I have at least 3 alternatives that will save them about 1/3 on their bill with equal or better service, and some of those carriers are even providing free telephone replacement just to get the service. So that's what I bring to the party. That's what I can look at when people are looking, not even looking to make a change. Maybe they don't know what they don't know. There's something called unconscious incompetence. People just don't know what they don't know. It's not that they're not good at their own business. You can't be good at everything and you can't know about everything. And that's where I come in. My history and my background gives me the ability to talk to people in their terms about what they could do with their business using newer technology or changing the technology that they're using. My service is free. I don't charge a customer, as I mentioned earlier, I don't charge a customer 1 penny for what I do. If they send me a phone bill, or if I can look at their equipment and I can make a change for them, and the carrier comes in and provides that service, the carrier pays me, not the customer. So I can give them choices that they wouldn't get from any one carrier or any one provider. The other thing I do is low voltage cabling. I contract that out, but I have a couple of companies that I work with that can do infrastructure cabling if somebody's moving into a new facility. All of those things are things that I can help negotiate the best deal for the customer and get them good quality service, the best price, without having to spend a disproportionate amount of time shopping 5 or 6 or 7 different providers to find out which one's the best. I do that for them. My service is free. Any questions?
Not so much a question, but more of a comment, kind of a testimonial for him. One of the things that Steve's great at too is he's aware of how to cut through red tape with people and who's really vetted to be a good solution. You and I don't know the best types of providers, carriers. I have a client right now that had a major issue. They signed up with someone who seemed like a great deal, great cost savings. Unfortunately, for the first month after their rollout, they were dropping calls right and left, and I mean, how much business did they lose from that? How much money did they lose? He already knew, oh yeah, because they didn't go through an agent like him. He knew, hey, their customer support isn't good, but then even when they needed it, because he's able to cut through the red tape, he didn't just get a level 1 support person. He was able to make some calls, get a level 2 person on the phone who was actually able to resolve the real issue. And having an agent like Steve who has the contacts and the connections to do that is invaluable.
Thank you for that. Any other questions, Michael?
So I guess this comes from kind of like my back. I kind of relate with how you work in regards to being able to look at all carriers. If we know the carrier when we're referring you, is there a certain carrier that in your world you would call a layup for business? Like,
Transition
hey,
from.
Yep. So, hey, this
Well,
carrier.
since we're recording this, I'm not going to
Okay.
downplay.
Oh, sorry.
I'm not going to downplay any one of the carriers in my arsenal. But there are some carriers that are very expensive, and yet some of those same carriers provide great internet service, and I will hop aboard their internet service, but maybe their phone service is not the best thing to use. So we can sometimes use a combination of services, like a cable provider that provides high-speed internet, but doesn't have the best deal on hosted telephone service, without mentioning any company names in this market.
Well, I'd like to just add to what Pete said. The one thing that I've noticed about Steve is when I introduce him to one of my clients or recommend him, they always thank me for it, because Steve, as I mentioned earlier in this meeting, integrity and honesty is one of my top values, and that value is what Steve brings to the table. So I think that working with Steve is a plus for anybody. Even if he doesn't save you money, he is a great guy to have on your team.
Perfect. Ideal business so I'm sure you can work with any business, any industry, but either the type of business that you get excited for or excited to work with, or the size of the business.
Sure. Sweet spot, the question is what type of business do I work with? Sweet spot is companies that have 10 to 50 telephones, single location or multiple location. Multiple location companies sometimes don't realize that they can transfer calls between each other. I can make them all look like they're under one roof if they have multiple locations. The industries, I try to stay away from industries that the headquarters is somewhere else, unless the local decision maker can depart from what the corporation wants. But if the corporation's here, I'd love to speak to them as well.
What's a good question that might open the door to a conversation that we could then refer you in? Is there any leading questions that you found tend to
Well,
get them talking?
the easiest question is, are you paying too much for your phone service? Because that's a good place to start. Sometimes a phone bill will tell me not only what they're paying for their phone service, but I get to see what old phone system they might be using, and one leads to the other. But that's, if they're with, I will tell them if they are in the right place. I'll absolutely say, you have exactly what you need. It's perfect for what you're doing, and call me in 3 years if anything changes. Some people are in a contract there. They're in a contract for 3 years, and they can't get out of it. So, I'll be glad to talk to them when the time comes, 2 or 3 months before the contract is up. We can start to talk about what they want to do next. But ideally, everybody's phone bill, I can look at anybody's phone bill and ask them about their phone system and their phone service and their internet. And some people I just help with their internet service. They have internet service that's inconsistent. I work with companies that provide fiber. I can get them fiber. All of the carriers that I work with have multiple services in many cases, and so they're all, the phone bill is the first place to start.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Steve. Great presentation.
Appreciate it.